later.
Well, when I first came to the next Comedy Store venue, after it's 10 years after you'd been part of the group that had got it going, it was entering a phase where there was a sort of ironic reaction to that dogma, where people that probably didn't even really feel like that felt an obligation to be slightly homophobic or sexist because it was different
against the previous regime. Yeah, and the book, in a sense, is also, it's not only, it's an account of being that figure, that spearhead. And then I think it also goes on to a point where I'm starting to think, hang on a minute, I'm being left behind. You know, I mean, that bit where, which is absolutely true, where I go and see the young ones on tour in Oxford. Yeah. And then I have to be taken home with what appears to be very severe flu. And in fact, it's just envy.
Envy.
Yeah.
Just with the physical manifestation of envy.
Yeah.
It's like flu.
Yeah.
It's streaming out of you.
Yeah. A weakness in the limbs, shaking, you know, visual confusion.
I got that, actually. I got that once when I gave up for a bit. And I went to see a comic who had always said he was massively influenced by me and said that without me, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I went to see him and I went, yeah, well, I can see that, you know, and I could see it in his act, which was going to 500 people in a big theatre. Yeah. And I was sort of got the shakes of thinking, I need to do this again because I don't mind being forgotten, but I don't want to be forgotten but live on in a half-remembered version of someone else's act. You know, and it's weird. Like, you don't realise you've got an ego. And you don't like to think you have, but then sometimes.
No, when you are kind of comic, you think you're all kind of artistic intent. But yeah, there's tremendous. You know, nobody's a comic who's not propelled by tremendous kind of ego. But I just thought it was an interesting task to give an account at least. And the next one, if I do another one, we'll carry on with that. It's about being an artist, and it's about being an innovative artist. And one of the things that happens if you're an innovative artist is people take what's innovative about you, strip away all the shit that you think's important, and just fucking say, you know. Just do the commercial. Take your commercial core, and how do you react to that? You know, I really like the bit you talked about how in the early days of the Comedy Store, the other acts would sort of hang around drinking with the audience, and you didn't feel that Alexei Sayle could do that because he needed to intimidate them and for them to dislike him or hate him or be frightened of him. So he couldn't go around saying, "Do you want a pint?" And of course, the knock-on effect of that is you have this very powerful stage thing, but you can't do all the networking stuff. You can't go on. I had a point about 5 years ago. I was being asked to go on chat shows. I thought I can't do that because you sort of spoil the thing then. Yeah. And for you, it just made for a fucking boring Saturday night for me. Yeah.
It's terrible. I had to stay backstage. Locked away.
Hide away. Yeah. I know, it's awful.
So, you know, in a way, the promotional...
And now I don't care.
Well, the promotional opportunities and the networking opportunities weren't available to you because you couldn't sort of go and be that. You couldn't have done Alexei Sayle, the stage character, on Wogan, could you? You couldn't have sat there with your hat pulled down,
and I couldn't shouting. Be me. And at that point, I couldn't be me. No. Alexei, who's like got no, you know, he's got very little connection with that man. Yeah, the shouting, you know, the crazy guy. So yeah, I was very hampered by, I think, that.
There's a great quote there, though, from Linda, where you said that, you know, a lot of people in their 20s and 30s spend all their time worrying that the best thing was happening somewhere else. But during the first year, 18 months of the Comedy Store and the start of the comic strip, you both knew that you were at exactly the most interesting thing that you would have liked to have been at, which was those nights that gig was starting.
And that's something that, I mean, again, that's why in a way you should write a book about, because that's not something that's given to many people. No. You know, because it's a rare thing to be at the Cavern Club. In fact, Linda was at the Cavern Club when the Beatles were playing, or to be at Sun Records.
So it's her then that gets these things going.
She's much more prescient than me. She could do stand-up. Right. She would have been a much better actor than me. But no, to be that, and that's one of the things I really wanted to try and get across, because it's such a rare thing, is to be in that place, to be, you know, whatever, you know, Sun City, where, you know, Memphis when Elvis was, you know, to be in Paris in the, you know, with Picasso and so on in the 20s, you know, was
something I really want to communicate, and that is something that I am endlessly grateful for and remind myself about.
But it is communicated really well. But it's what's also communicated is the situations that allowed that to happen, which was social housing, squats, those sorts of jobs. Because even when you're on the front of Time Out, being written about as Britain's most exciting new comedian, you've still got a 3-day-a-week job.
Still teaching,
and all
and riding a bicycle around.
Well, in fact, you were doing a lot of the sorts of jobs as well that people would now would be unpaid internships, like the freelance illustrating. I like all the stuff about being in 70s London and the sorts of people you met, and there were a lot of laugh out loud bits in the book, which I know is like a mad cliche.
Because that's the other thing I wanted to do, was also to make it funny as well.
Yeah,
you know, not, as well as not, you know, it's a very funny book.
You write a lot about going to cinema in the 70s and how, which I think, but this is good because you talk about how a man of a similar age in the 70s might have been talking about Led Zeppelin or David Bowie or some jazz musicians they like. Your heroes and the people whose careers you seem to be following seem to be hard left revolutionary guerrillas from various Marxist uprisings around the world. Right, so you're in the news, you're in the cinema. One weekend when she was visiting me in London, Linda and I went to the Odeon in Leicester Square to see the newly released Sylvester Stallone movie Rocky. Before the lights went down, I noticed in the audience a few rows behind me a mournful-looking, slightly pop-eyed, balding man with a droopy moustache. I whispered to Linda, "You see that man in the 5th row? I think it's Walid Jumblat, leader of the Druze militia from the Chouf Mountains of the Lebanon." "You're always saying that," she replied. "Yes," I hissed. "But this time I'm certain." The Druze sect were much in the news because they were one of the fractions fighting in the Lebanese civil war, which over the next 10 years would tear the country apart. I paid close attention to the coverage of the conflict on the TV news because I was always hoping to catch a glimpse of one of the young Arab men who used to come to our flat in Finchley. Then I'd be able to say, "Hey, isn't that Ahmed managing the .50 machine gun at the PLO roadblock?" Which I thought would make me seem awfully sophisticated to whoever I was talking to. After the film finished, I approached the man with the moustache and said to him, "Excuse me, are you Walid Jumblat, leader of the Druze militia from the Chouf Mountains of the Lebanon?" "Yes, I am," he said. "What did you think of the film then?" I asked after a pause. "It was all right."
Because a lot of them...
So you saw Rocky with him?
Yeah, well, he jumped that. Yeah, leader of the Druze. Yeah, because a lot of them, that particular era of Arab, you know, before the jihadis, they'd been to like Portsmouth Polytechnic.
Yeah.
I think Wally Jumblat probably studied at like, you know, he'd done
They'd had a good liberal education.
Yeah, often in Britain though, because of the links with Britain or France. Or, you know, a lot of them. A lot of the Arab, you know, a lot of the Arabs who came to our house, you know, been to Liverpool University or whatever, and now, like the bloke, it's not in this. One of the blokes who lived with Washington later on became King Hussein's brother-in-law. His sister married King Hussein of Jordan, and he'd done physics at Liverpool University.
Yeah.
You know,
Small world.
Yeah.